This is the Dynasty Roundtable podcast, and tonight we are going to, I don't know if we're going to do something a little bit different. I don't think so, but it's a little bit of a different spin on a classic topic. So this is what I'm packaging together as the ultimate rebuilder's guide for the 2026 fantasy football season, Dynasty fantasy football season. So at the start of this episode, we are going to give you some strategies for rebuilding teams, some of which I think is specific to 2026. I think that there are some things this year that you can do that in other years, maybe you couldn't do, and vice versa. Like there are some things this year that, you probably can't do that in other years you probably could do. And then at the end of the episode, we are going to give you some trade targets for rebuilders only. So if you're a contending team, if you have all contending teams, congratulations. You don't need to watch this episode. Or maybe you watch this episode just to see what your opponents might be thinking, right? That I think that could be useful. But anyway, Matt Babich, that's what we're going to do tonight. And how you doing, man?
Doing great, Seth. We are on the eve of the Hard Knocks premiere. And
who is
we're
Hard
2
Knocks
days
this
away.
year?
Seattle. I believe it's the first time a reigning Super Bowl
Okay.
champion will be featured on the show.
Right.
So it'll be very interesting. A lot of storylines there. Kenneth Walker, Super Bowl MVP, gone. The story of Sam Darnold, Clint Kubiak no longer there. A lot of interesting storylines there to follow. But it's really the pinnacle of football is back. We start seeing more kind of live football content of this season. We get the quarterback show on Netflix, which kind of recaps the previous season. And then we get Hard Knocks, which is our first look into this season. We get the Hall of Fame game on Thursday, which we always look forward to because it's the first football game of the season. And then halfway through the first quarter, we're like, okay, we immediately start taking football for granted. The moment the Hall of Fame game comes on, because we've been itching for this football. And then as soon as we see these third stringers in and it's just an ugly, ugly game, let's be honest, a lot of people are gonna end up turning it off. But football is here. We're in the middle of redraft season, and it's fitting to talk about rebuilders right now because with redraft and with the start of the season becoming so palpable, the energy, the hunger is coming from people who want to win. And I don't have any stats to back this up, but anecdotally, I'd be willing to bet that most people that don't have a very strong contending roster are more likely to think in terms of trying to win now as we get to this point of the season, before the games are played, before they get to see what their roster actually is. They get to think about what their roster could be. They're seeing all the training camp hype, and you get more teams that think they can win now. So you, the viewer, potentially as a rebuilding candidate in some of your leagues, now's the perfect time to feed off of that energy and go the other way, because you have listened to us in the past. You've listened to other smart fantasy football analysts, and you know that one of the first things you do is you get real with your roster, and you've already made the smart decision to say, hey, I'm not competing this year. I gotta get rid of some of these assets. I got guys that are tanking in some of my leagues that are trading away guys like CeeDee Lamb for draft picks. These are the moves sometimes that you have to make. So I think it's a good time to talk about it.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna get right into the strategy talk. So I think for rebuilding teams in 2026, I think you said it. I think this is a good natural transition. You have to be honest with your roster and where you stand. And if you're not sure, there's all kinds of resources out there. Hell, you could put your roster in the YouTube comments if you wanted to, or you could DM one of us on Twitter at Seth_Dewald, at Matt Babich and Matt. Wait a minute. What is your Twitter handle again?
Babich_Matt10.
At Babich_Matt10. I knew that. I just didn't know it. But anyway, so you have to get honest with yourself. Like I said, you could reach out to us if you're unsure. There's Dynasty Daddy, where you can plug in your your league, and it'll tell you, it'll literally say you're a contender, you're not a contender. Sometimes it'll be obvious, sometimes it won't be. But you have to be honest with your roster and pick a lane, right? Are you going to contend? Are you going to rebuild? And if you're going to rebuild, then you're in the right place for this video. And so once you've chosen that lane, you've chosen the path of a rebuilder. Good job. You've decided, you've figured it out. You've figured out what you're going to do. Now it's time to stick in that lane, right? Just like in Lord of the Rings, you don't want to veer from the path, right? You want to stay on the path of the rebuilding team. And the first thing that I always do right about this time of year is I look around the league at the 11 other players that I'm playing against, and I try to figure out, okay, who are the contenders? Who are the guys that I'm going to be trade partners with? Who are the other rebuilders? And I'm hoping that there are more contenders than rebuilders, because I don't want to be, bidding against 3 or 4 or 5 other rebuilding teams to get the attention of fewer, contending teams. So I'm hoping that there's more contending teams than rebuilding teams, but I'm trying to identify those teams and figure out what they want, figure out what they need, and then try to make that happen for them in a way that makes sense for them. And what I'm really looking to do is I'm looking for that contending team that might not be a contending team, that contending team that thinks they're a contending team that really is a fringe playoff team at best. And I'm trying that's my favorite person to trade with, because I know their team is going to get better if I trade them my veterans, my win now pieces, but they have the best chance of having those draft picks become higher if I'm trading for draft picks, especially maybe not for 2027, although the 2027 picks could be extremely good too if that's the case. You never know. But if I get some 2028 picks, I have a good feeling, especially if they're acquiring a lot of veterans, that those picks might be super valuable and super early. So that is probably where I would start, especially now, because people are starting to get back in the swing of it. People are starting to open up the sleeper app again, look scrolling through their teams as the buzz starts to pick up, and it's only going to get more palpable as we get closer and closer to the season. But Matt Babich, what are you doing once you've do you do something similar, or what is a strategy that you are employing right now?
So I do employ a similar strategy. I think there's some additional ones that I want to get to, but one thing that you just mentioned I want to kind of piggyback off of is when you mention, see what you said, make that happen for them, find what they need and make that happen for them. The reason, or let me back that up. The benefit of trading with somebody with a different mentality, a different focus than you, i.e. redraft versus competing, win now, is perceived value is so much different. So we talk about this a lot in dynasty strategy, but a pitfall of a lot of dynasty trades is the, trying to pull the wool over each other's eyes and trying to have that trade where you come out massively on top. The beauty of trading with somebody who's in a completely different mindset as you is that you can win this trade through having a relatively even transaction, just depending on the lens that you're looking through. So it's much easier to trade between rebuilding and win now than it is between 2 win now teams or between 2 rebuilding teams, because you have 2 different focuses in mind. It's literally the definition of one man's trash is another man's treasure. Devontae Adams on your rebuilding team is worth a hell of a lot less than somebody pushing for a back-to-back title. And similarly, their first round pick to them is a lot less valuable than it is getting that championship. And it's a lot more valuable to your roster. So don't go into these trades thinking I have to, get a steal here, or I got to, trick this person into doing that. Just approach it from, hey, this will help you and it will help me. and it'll be easier to get a trade done. That's a point of advice for rebuilding teams. It's a point of advice for everybody really in the dynasty space that we've talked about a lot. Now on to specific strategies for rebuilding teams. I have one that came to mind that I don't necessarily know if it's something that you can do better this year than in other years, but something I've been thinking about more, especially as I have some of my redrafts, is to not be afraid to buy some of the cheaper win now assets that you believe are undervalued. So, first, you never know what will happen in fantasy football. Maybe you enter your competitive window earlier than you thought, and you can use these assets in your transition period, or if variance really breaks your way, push for a title. Now, that being said, we know the most likely scenarios that you're going to look to sell these pieces. And the long shot stashes and the long-term holds are nice. Getting these undrafted free agents in your fantasy dynasty rookie drafts that you think can make some noise. You got your taxi squad. That's all well and good. But we want to be constantly acquiring value in dynasty, especially as a rebuilder. So that means taking a stab on some of the players that can increase their value this season and be moved to competitors for future capital. Because just as you can identify potential people who view themselves as contenders, but then end up not being contenders, you could also sit back and say, I believe player X is undervalued, and somebody who is not the top two or this upper echelon of teams is going to be competing. And this player is going to be valuable to them or to some of their competitors that smell the blood in the water and they can see that there's a shark coming for us. So that's one of my biggest things where sometimes in redraft or in rebuild, we get stuck in a mindset where everything's got to be this long-term play. I want to trade my older veteran for a pick or for a younger guy who could break out. I want to stash guys that are at the bottom of the barrel because maybe they'll be worth something and I can get a third round pick. Well, what about investing in somebody who's the wide receiver 40, let's say, in dynasty football, but should be valued closer to a top 30, top 24 receiver, and you believe that value will become there? Yeah, maybe you win one or two more games than you would have liked to. But if you're right, those types of trades will net you more value because you can only offload so many veterans, Seth. Well, there's another part of advice that both of us have on our list that you can only do so much of. So at some point, you got to be looking to acquire assets that you need to turn around and sell.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy for us to sit here and say that. I think most people understand the number one objective of a rebuilding team is to get rid of your veterans. But sometimes, you might be able to trade with a rebuilding team to acquire a veteran and then potentially turn that veteran around and sell it later on for a higher price than what you bought it for if you're playing that game. Now, it's a risky game, but I do agree with you in the sense that I think all options should be on the table. I think a perfect example, somebody you referenced earlier, Davante Adams, right? And a perfect just slam dunk rebuilding move, I think, would be they're ranked right next to each other according to Keep Trade Cut, is trade Davante Adams for Jayden Higgins, who Jayden Higgins, spoiler alert, is a player on my list that I think could take a really big jump this year. But if somebody is just going to give you Davante Adams, right? And so you get an offer something stupid, I don't know. I'm trying to, I can't, I'm Antonio Williams, give me Antonio Williams and I'll give you Davante Adams. Man, that's a huge value gain. Just looking at Keep Trade Cut, Antonio Williams is ranked outside the top 150. Davante Adams is sitting at 120. Now you might look at that as a rebuilding team and go, well, I took 75 cents on the dollar. I did what I had to do. I like Antonio Williams. Great. But if Davante Adams produces like we think he can for a win now team, it's risky. I don't know if I would do it all the time. Like, but you could then turn Devontae Adams into Jayden Higgins and then essentially have traded Antonio Williams for Jayden Higgins. So you have to keep an open mind and try to zig sometimes where other people zag. So I think some people on the surface of that would go, well, why would you trade for veterans? Well, like the right now you're in value accumulating mode. So sometimes if you get a stupid offer, and maybe Antonio Williams is probably a bad idea. It's just like the first name that came across, like if I don't know, like if Tank Dell starts to get some buzz, you know what I'm saying? Like if somebody's just going to give you a veteran, take the veteran, and then 3 or 4 or 5 weeks down the line, you might be able to sell that veteran for something more valuable. So keeping an open mind and playing the value game, because yes, at some point in time, you're going to have to try to cash in that value for production, right? That's the game we're all playing here. Is eventually we want to get to the point where like a ton of our players are just elite producers, but you're not there yet. So you kind of have to just take value. And one of the ways to do that is to tier down and to target players that are easy tier down targets. And that might mean tiering down from an elite player and tiering down and taking that elite asset and breaking it into 2 or 3, and taking some of those assets and breaking them into 2 or 3. And that might involve taking the discount on injured players throughout the course of the season, and that might also mean, hey, you're a rebuilding team. You can stash some of these guys that maybe they get injured, and maybe, if you're in a shallower league, maybe some of them get dropped. You can be the one to pick them up and stash them, because you can use your roster spots wisely. You can stash quarterbacks. You can stash backup quarterbacks, because we know 3 or 4 or 5 of these quarterbacks are going to get hurt. Another 1 or 2 are probably going to get benched at some point. And you can be the guy that has that backup quarterback, and you can trade them away for something, right? I got an offer last year, Marcus Mariota, for a 3rd round rookie pick. Marcus Mariota wasn't worth anything. Marcus Mariota right now isn't worth anything. But for that brief moment in time, he was worth something, and I stashed him on my bench. Bada bing, bada boom. So these are all things that you can do as a rebuilding team that, again, it's just, if I had to boil it down to one sentence or one phrase, acquire value. And then in the hopes that a year down the road, 2 years down the road, you can turn that value into production.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, that was a great transition. I was going to try and clear something up, and then you just went so seamlessly into the next point of emphasis that I just had to sit back and wait. So when I say win now assets, the one thing I want to make clear is, now typically those are veterans, but a win now asset is really any player that has more value in the next 1 to 3 years than they do in the next 3 to 6 years. So yes, my point does stand for veterans, and I'll get more in depth on this when we get to the players, but a lot of players on my list that I believe are win now assets that you can go out and flip are guys that you could also stash on your roster for next year if you can't move them. Some of them are on the younger side. But my last point of emphasis here, I have tier down as well. I think it's a great move, especially tiering down from the elite, because like you said, our goal is to acquire value. So if you have a Brock Bowers, I know it's going to be hard for you to pivot off of that. But if you can get Tucker Kraft plus, if you can get Kyle Pitts, maybe not. Yeah, why not Kyle Pitts? He's not that old. Kyle Pitts plus, if you can get Tyler Warren plus, and really just get some replicable production along with additional value, it sucks to make, but those are the types of trades where you look at your starting lineup and go, oh, I didn't take that much of a hit here, and I was able to acquire some additional value. Like, there are people that probably tiered down from Jamar Chase and got Malik Neighbors from a draft pick. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be you. That type of stuff doesn't happen all the time, but those are the bets that you have to try and make in order to acquire value and turn, a lost team. There are different types of rebuilds. There are some where you're going to be in the thick of it so deep that you're going to have to do that if you want any chance of getting out of it. There are some where you can just get rid of some veterans, retool, and be right back in the mix. But last thing is more so with trading. Your capital and your asset management is most important when you're in rebuild. That's when you have the least margin for error if you want to become a competing team. So just keep in mind that the more expensive an asset is, the more you want to be risk averse. Buying someone like Rachaad White, who we still think is a value at his current dynasty price, is risky because of some of the off the field issues. And now there's talks of potentially not being, re-signed with the team. There's just a lot of risk there that you don't necessarily want to inherit. So my advice when you're looking at that scenario would be to try and find a similar option that incurs less risk on you. It may not feel as good because you may have some strong feelings about Rachaad White, but you can only take so many risky stabs before you put yourself in a really bad spot.
Yeah, and getting players that have value insulation, which is why you're targeting younger players. Just I used this example before, but Cam Ward I think is a really good example. Number 1 pick, quarterback in a bad situation. I'm not sure how far Caleb Williams fell down the dynasty rankings. Probably not that far, considering he was the number 1 pick in a quarterback heavy draft. But assets like that, that those are pretty safe in the near term, and down the road, 2-3 years down the road, that they're going to be locked in starters for their team, and probably some team is going to give them another shot if it doesn't work out with their current team. And this kind of leads me into talking about picks, because this is the thing I was alluding to, that it's going to be harder to do this year because of the hype on the 2027 class. Getting those first round picks, right? Trading for rookie picks. I think that is the asset that is the most coveted for rebuilding teams, because it's liquid, right? You can do whatever you want with it. And the more you have, the more, money you put in the bank, essentially, for your dynasty squad. But getting those 2027 picks is going to be tricky. And I think one of the ways we've talked about where you can still get at the 2027 class is those second and third round picks are still going to be very valuable, but I don't know if people are going to view them in the same way as the 2027 firsts, right? Because I'm already hearing prominent dynasty people saying, I don't like, not backing off of this class because the elite names, like, we know who they are, right? And we know that they're really good, but I've heard a few some rumblings like, I don't know how deep this class is, and I would say I wouldn't necessarily worry about that, and I would be getting seconds and thirds, especially if you're a rebuilding team. Like, if the firsts are monumental, Herculean, impossible to acquire assets, then getting the seconds and thirds, I think, is just fine, especially if you're getting other players on top, tiering down, all that good stuff. And I would say you don't want to just give players away in a tier down, but if they're veteran players that we're talking about and you're trying to get, again, it's all about value. It all comes down to that for a rebuilding team, but you are trying to get those older, riskier assets off of your team sooner rather than later. And if you go about acquiring one of those guys, it's with the idea that, okay, it's risky, but down the line, I can trade this guy for more than what I just gave up, or somebody just was like, here, take player X, here, take Terry McLaurin or whatever. That's probably a bad example, but you get what I'm trying to say. Sometimes that there are offers that show up in your inbox and you go, yeah, I'll take, again, I hate to use the Devontae Adams example again, but yeah, I guess I'll take Devontae Adams for nothing. I'm sure that I can probably trade him away down the road, and that's a little bit riskier for a rebuilding team, as I said. But again, the picks, I think, this year are going to be harder. And again, I wouldn't shy away from the 2028 picks either. But anything else to add to that before we get into specific players that we're targeting for rebuilding teams?
I'll close it out quickly with this. Another point of emphasis for us in Dynasty in general is knowing your league. And that plays a big role in picking your paths that we've talked about here. For example, again, I'll bring up the Devontae Adams example for the fourth or fifth time this episode. But knowing your league, there are leagues I'm in where I'm like, yeah, I could get away with that. Like someone could give me a second round pick for Devontae Adams if they need him bad enough and if Adams is performing well enough later in the season. There are some leagues where I'm like, this league's not active enough. Like I could very well see myself getting stuck with this asset. Maybe I could pull it off, but I'm not confident enough to make that move myself. So just knowing your leagues is a huge role in evaluating whether or not you can, pull off some of these moves that you're looking for.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that because it's funny, not to, belabor this point too much, but how I feel very strongly like, oh yeah, I could trade that guy in one league, and then another league, it's like, man, it's like pulling teeth to get a trade done. You just like every league is its own economy. I've heard that said on other podcasts, like micro economy, I think is the term that I got that gets thrown around to, we use those terms to make us sound smart is what we do, even though we're just, dudes playing a fantasy football game called Dynasty, which is one of the best things ever created by man. But anyway, I completely, that's a great point. And being open and contacting your league mates, and these are things that you should be doing too, and keeping the lines of communication open, and again, trying to meet the needs of those contending teams. I would think that that is one of the more important things that you can do to kind of give yourself a leg up, because I was thinking about this the other day and today, the spam offers. I used to be as guilty as the next person as far as like spamming out offers to everybody. Like, I think that could potentially, you could eventually be that guy who just sends out trades and it's just like, okay, reject. Like, oh God, I got another offer from, this guy again. Let's see what it is. All right, okay, reject. And then I think that can do some damage potentially without you really knowing it. So I think the way to handle that is to do, I can't remember what the term is for it, but you can essentially put price tags on, like it's like you're shopping at the store, like I'll take any second for this player, any third. Like if you're just going to spam out offers, you know what I mean? Like doing that is a way to subvert the spam and just be very targeted with your approach in trades, like again, try to meet the needs of those contending teams and try to help each other out. And, they try to help you out. That's how trades are supposed to work. But anyway, let us know what some of your strategies are for rebuilding teams in 2026, because there's a lot more that we could talk about. But I do want to get into specific trade targets tonight. And I'm just going to start out, and potentially this is cheating, but every year there are rookies that underperform. And I think that we're going to have quite a few rookies that underperform and potentially get forgotten about. Now, I wrote down Jeremiah Love. I don't think Jeremiah Love's going to get forgotten about. I do think that he's going to have a rough first year in the NFL because the offense isn't good. The offensive line, they've upgraded it with a couple players, but it wasn't good last year. I don't think it's going to be very good this year. Tyler Algier is there. I've said this before, but if he's good enough to take away goal line work from Bijan Robinson, he's good enough to take away goal line work from Jeremiah Love, a rookie. It might take him some time to fully gain the trust of the new coaching staff, even though he was taken third overall. We've seen rookies come into the NFL and struggle. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, for a while, it was David Montgomery's show. You remember that? Mm-hmm. So again, I think potentially Jeremiah Love could be had. Now that's going to be expensive, so I'm just going to mention that as an aside. But I think the real prize, and I think it's something that we both agree with, is Fernando Mendoza, because I don't think he's going to start right away. And I haven't looked recently at the Raiders training camp buzz, but the word on the street is that potentially it could just be Kirk Cousins for the entire year. Now, I don't know if I believe that, because I don't know how good Kirk Cousins is. and he could just be so bad that they have to play Fernando Mendoza. And I think Fernando Mendoza is going to struggle this year. But I present to you Exhibit B. If Exhibit A is Fernando Mendoza, I give you Cam Ward. Look at Cam Ward's value and look at where it started and look at where it is now. Cam Ward is player 57 according to Keep Trade Cut. Fernando Mendoza, the 101, potentially 102 for sure in Superflex. Well, maybe not in some leagues. There were some leagues where Fernando Mendoza was going later, but 53 overall according to Keep Trade Cut. And he's already going down in price, down 7 spots according to their 30-day trend. So I'm keeping my eye on Fernando Mendoza because I think this happens every year. People get frustrated. People, especially those win now teams. Although if you're a win now team, you probably don't have Fernando Mendoza. But I just think it's a good player to keep your eye on.
Yeah, I've been in on Fernando Mendoza as the 101 in Superflex formats. So just because of value insulation and these things that we might see with Jeremiah Love in this offense. So I'm very much in line with that. I think the first guy I have, I'm going to be pretty brief with mine. I don't know how many of these we're going to get through, but I have a pretty long list. Number one guy, maybe not number one guy, but the first guy on my list is Josh Downs, 25 years old. And this is somebody I consider more of a win now asset. You have, he's 2 years before his age apex. We have seen previously him getting hid behind, Michael Pittman as the alpha of the offense. We have the ascension of Tyler Warren. Alec Pierce is, on the pup currently, but he got a lot of money. I think that the first half of this season for Downs is going to be very, very good. I am a believer in his talent and what he could produce years to come, but I don't think he's priced appropriately for a win now perspective. And that's why I would love to take a guy like Downs, who is still a lot of hype without much to show for it. I think there's still a lot of people that don't fully believe A, in this Colts offense, and B, in what Downs can do because of some of that history. And I think once he's out there getting 7 to 8 targets a game, getting easy button targets and producing, that he could be flipped for a profit. And I think he's a case of worst case scenario. If you can't flip Josh Downs for a profit this season and he performs, then, you're looking at age 26 Josh Downs and probably maintains a role in this Shane Steichen offense, because once he proves it, a guy like Josh Downs with his talent, it's not like they're going to draft someone and he's going to completely go away. And they just committed a lot of money to Alec Pierce. So if he hits, I don't see this team investing a lot of draft capital in a receiver going forward. I certainly don't see them splashing in the free agent market. So I think Downs has some relatively solid value insulation over the next year and a half. And for that reason, he's somebody who, even as a rebuilding team, he's 25 years old, I'm willing to pay for, just because I don't think the market is quite caught up with what his upside is yet.
Yeah, and it's wide open for him this year in Indianapolis, and I like Shane Steichen quite a bit, so I like that. I think it's an easy tier down guy that you could tier down to.
Yeah.
I think another really nice tier down candidate is TreVeyon Henderson. And I know Ramadre Stevenson is going to be annoying, and I think that is the key. I think I could see some dynasty manager getting frustrated and going, yeah, I don't know if TreVeyon Henderson, I don't know if I can count on him as my RB2 or my RB3 for my dynasty team. I think I have to go get whatever, a Chase Brown or a Kenneth Walker or whatever the case may be. And if you have one of those guys, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, I think Christian McCaffrey is the perfect swap 1-for-1 for TreVeyon Henderson if you have Christian McCaffrey and you are a rebuilding team. Because TreVeyon Henderson, we loved him coming out of school, and we saw what he could do when Ramadre Stevenson went down with an injury for those 3 games. It was unbelievable. And, the Patriots went right back to Ramadre Stevenson. But there is a world where the breakout happens this year for TreVeyon Henderson. Now, I'm skeptical of that because I think Ramondre Stevenson's good. And I think that's unfortunate for TreVeyon Henderson. But what if I'm wrong, right? What if the Patriots go, you know what? We got A.J. Brown. We have Romeo Doubs now. It's time to take the training wheels off. It's time for us to use TreVeyon Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson in a true 50-50 split. And that's, I think, all he needs. I think that's all the fuel that he needs on the fire for him to really have a nice season for us in Dynasty. And right now he's sitting just outside the top 50 at 52, RB12 overall. I think that that's an asset that's acquirable. Matt, what do you think? And who's your next guy?
Yeah, I like Henderson a lot. There was a note that came out on camp that I think was pretty telling, where the note was that Henderson's still struggling in pass blocking, but if he gets that down, then the sky's the limit really for what he can do. And the note on Ramondre Stevenson was that he's done enough to keep the backfield at 50-50. And that's interesting to me. That frame of mind is like they are waiting for this to be TreVeyon Henderson's backfield, and it's Ramondre Stevenson that has to play himself onto the field consistently. So I think Henderson's a guy who is going to eventually take the keys to this backfield. I think he's way more talented than Ramondre. I think Ramondre is talented, and we may not see a TreVeyon Henderson like full bell cow role that we see with like a Kyron Williams of past. But Henderson, with his ability, doesn't need to get that 70% opportunity share to be an absolute value at his cost. So I really like that pick. I'm going to go with two dusty veterans that are relatively free that I think are going to be difference makers. One is Deebo Samuel. I could see Deebo Samuel being Seth. I could see Deebo Samuel finishing as a top 15 receiver in fantasy points per game this year.
I'm smiling because I know you're going to get crushed in the comments for this.
Go ahead, crush me in the comments.
I'm here.
I have Stribling on my list too.
I'm here.
I have Stribling on my list too. I think I've come around to the fact that maybe I don't agree with the talent evaluation, but I'm certainly never going to pretend that I may disagree, and I will talk about my disagreements. That's part of what we do on the show. But at the end of the day, I have been wrong more often than NFL franchises. That's the facts. So the fact of the matter is maybe Stribling is better than I thought he was. But what matters is he's probably going to have a role without Ricky Pearsall there. And with Mike Evans, he's already has a quad injury. We don't really know what's going on. Kittle's on the pup. We don't know when he's coming back. But seriously, feel free to thrash me in the comments. 49ers friend of mine who knows a lot of ball is basically saying, like, dude, Deebo is going to get so many underneath target. Like, they're going to bring back the easy button for Deebo. And I've seen people online saying, like, Deebo, that kind of easy button, passing game is something that this game has been missing and something that's had to be fed into Christian McCaffrey. With all of his touches, I really think Deebo back in this offense could absolutely dominate. At minimum, he's going to be a top 36 candidate every week, and that's going to be something valuable for a contending team. You can pick him up for little to nothing, and no one is going to be surprised, especially because Stribling's a rookie. Mike Evans is getting accustomed to a new offense and getting chemistry with a new quarterback. No one should be surprised when Deebo Samuel leads the 49ers in targets and receiving week one. No one should be surprised. And then Stefon Diggs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of chatter about him joining a team. There are teams that need receivers. It seems that it wouldn't be shocking as of right now if Diggs were on the Washington Commanders, and Diggs is just a few weeks behind Deebo Samuel. So this is an even better opportunity to get someone for literally free. And you could sell him the moment he gets on a team and make a profit if you want to. So I think both of those guys are ugly names in Dynasty for a rebuilding team, but they will be valuable for somebody competing for a title.
Yeah, it's not conventional. I don't know if any other rebuilding show podcast, any other Dynasty podcast doing a rebuilding show would mention these names. But I think, Deebo is somebody that's on my radar in my redraft leagues now. I definitely want him on every team. Like Stribling, same story. It's like I believe in Kyle Shanahan as a play caller. So these target earners, if I believe, and I do, that Christian McCaffrey is not going to make it through the full season, and George Kittle is recovering from an injury, and Ricky Pearsall in the substation out there is keeping everybody hurt. Mike Evans is already so something's got to give here. Somebody's got to earn targets in this offense that is a well-designed offense. And yeah, I think that those two players on any team are great back of the end roster guys. And I'll get back to the conventional, so if we don't get yelled at too much in the comments, a player that I just love, and getting back to the 2026 rookies, I don't know if he's going to have a good year this year, although I do think he has a chance to lead the Browns in targets, and that would be Casey Concepcion. This is a talent over situation kind of evaluation, because I do not love this situation at all, especially if Deshaun Watson gets the majority of the snaps under center this year. I think that it could be a disaster. I think that they would be much better off with Shador under center, but that's, just my humble opinion. And I do think if it's Shador, then I think Casey Concepcion could have a nice season. But more importantly, I think the Browns could be in contention for one of these really nice quarterbacks in 2027 that we really like. I don't know if it'll be Dante Moore. Maybe they'll have the number 1 pick and get Archie Manning or whoever is the number 1 prospect at quarterback. Regardless, they have a lot of draft capital in 2027. I think Andrew Berry's got a pretty good head on his shoulders. And this time next year, we could be going, Cleveland Browns, Dante Moore, rookie quarterback with all these weapons. Casey Concepcion led him in targets last year. Yeah, now we're cooking with gas with Casey Concepcion in this offense. And he was one of my favorite wide receivers that came out of this class. And he just so happened to wind up in a horrible situation for now. So I'm willing to bet on the talent over situation. I know we've kind of disagreed on this one, but what are your thoughts here? And then what's your next guy?
Yeah, I just don't think the market sentiment is super down on Casey Concepcion. I'm not sure if it ever will be. I can definitely see the range of outcomes where there's a disappointing first year and we get that value. I also wouldn't be shocked playing in that slot role if he's getting 6 to 7 targets a game and there's enough production for the excuses to be taken into consideration and for owners to be like, well, he doesn't have a quarterback. I think what could help you is the fact that he was a back end of the first round. So a competitive team is going to have a lot less tolerance for a lack of production early on than Casey Concepcion, but you're going to have somebody on your team mid-season that is capable of trading for that unless you want to trade future picks, which the contending team will probably say, I'd rather have what I can get with KC than punt with a pick right now, or trade him to somebody who can offer me a veteran, somebody who is in the mix that isn't in the mix anymore. So I agree that you should be a target. I am more skeptical on the realism on being able to acquire him during the season. I'll go back to the conventional picks so I don't get grilled in the comments.
Go back to the boring. Yeah, I can't believe you're not going to talk about Derrick Henry as the next guy.
No, well, his value's high, and that's the whole point with these veterans is that you could scoop them up for very little. Josh Downs is kind of in the middle where you have that flexibility. Xavier Worthy's very young, 23 years old. And again, this is why I love fantasy football so much, is because I could be out on Xavier Worthy when he's way too overpriced. And then when he's wide receiver 50 in the middle of an offense that is begging for talent, then I can be back in on him. Because I don't know about you, Seth, but I think this KC offense is in for a huge rebound. It all starts with Kenneth Walker. It helps that Rashee Rice is back to cook some of this up. And I know that Xavier Worthy's hurt a little bit because of where Rashee Rice wins on the field. But if you go back to 2024, weeks 15 through the Super Bowl, he went 19.6, 20.5, 22.9, 0, but only played 3.5% of the snaps. I believe he had a concussion. Came back in week 20 with 9 points, 22, and 36 fantasy points to end the season. Now, I know some of those didn't count because they were in the playoffs and not in your fantasy playoffs, but that's the production that he was seeing later on in his rookie season after Rashee Rice left. Then what happens in 2025? Well, he runs one route against the Chargers in an opener and separates his shoulder and was playing hurt throughout all of last year and throughout offensive struggles. Matt Nagy, a Patrick Mahomes injury. There was a lot going on for the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm just willing to bet that a first round pick in an offense that still doesn't really have much target competition around him in this offense that we think is going to resurge is not worth wide receiver 50. And he's still really young. He's got a lot of different outs to production. And I think at age 23, bumping a guy like Worthy with the big playmaking ability that he has all the way down to wide receiver 50 is a little bit too far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. Worthy's still just 23 years old. This is going to be his third year with the Chiefs. And if you look around that offense, and again, please just keep sending out the viral clip of Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball into his own center's head. Just keep everybody keep retweeting that. Keep doing it. I'm buying Patrick Mahomes. I'm buying this Chiefs offense because let's be honest with ourselves. Okay, franchise X, you're a fan of whatever team that you're a fan of. I'm looking at you, Raiders fan, Chargers fan. I'm looking at you right now, Ravens fan. If you had the opportunity right now with everything that you know to swap your quarterback for Patrick Mahomes, you're telling me that you wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't say.
Okay, well, you're Drake May. But anyway, I'd have to think long and hard about it for Caleb Williams. And I think it'd be like 50-50. But that's like, and honestly, when push came to shove, as much as I love Caleb Williams, Patrick Mahomes is,
I might do it, Seth.
Is still 30 years old, plenty of football left.
With Drake May,
you can make an argument just like Brady, right? We're kind of in the middle where you can't really put that much talent around him because of the big contract. Now the contract might be the hang up, right? Like the contract Drake May and Caleb Williams are on, the rookie contract, you can't beat it, right? But contract aside, would you want Patrick Mahomes or your quarterback? Chances are you want Patrick Mahomes still, even with the stupidness of training camp. I don't care that he's throwing the ball in the back of the center's head, right? So this offense with Andy Reid, I think it's going to be just fine. I think Matt Nagy going out the door, addition by subtraction. I think, yes. I mean, Xavier Worthy outside of the top 120, he's at 131 overall, wide receiver 50, like you said. Ton of upside. This is the year 3, potential year 3 breakout. We know Rashee Rice is not reliable. We know Travis Kelce. I mean, have you seen a picture of Travis Kelce lately? I mean, looks like he's been at a few too many beer drinking activities, you know? Just he's been loving his life, and I can tell. But you know, he's got a month to get in shape. But anyway, I had to get that out of my system because that's been driving me crazy. I think this Chiefs offense is going to get back to closer to what they've been. And I think Xavier Worthy could have a big part of that. And I think Kenneth Walker, as we've said, I think Kenneth Walker is going to have a lot to do with that. I think the Chiefs are going to be a little bit more run-centric. But another player here that I think is going to be really good to acquire, and again, 2026 rookies, I'm telling you to buy all of them. Ty Simpson. Matthew Stafford, we talked about it last year, but we're not talking about his back issue. He still has that back issue. But we're not talking about it this year because he just played through a full healthy season, had an incredible year. What happens if what happens if he needs a game off here, game off there because of the back? The Rams have an incredibly talented roster. So I think that they could ride Ty Simpson to a win here or there if they needed to. What if we get a glimpse of Ty Simpson? What if he's really good? I remember, and people are going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but it's true. Joe Milton, once upon a time, took some snaps for the Cowboys and had a whole moment there for a second because he was scrambling around. He was making throws. Oh my God, let's tweet it out. And in today's day and age, having Ty Simpson, I think, even for the here and now is valuable. And of course, down the road, because clearly that is probably their heir apparent to Matthew Stafford. And you have Puka Nacua on this team as a number one wideout. You have Les Snead, F them picks, not afraid of going and making a big move for talented skill players. So I think I'm not a big fan of Ty Simpson, the talent, but this situation with Sean McVay and the cast of characters that are there right now, I think it's as insulated as it gets. And it's an asset that I'm wanting as a rebuilding team. So what are your thoughts there? And who else you got? We got maybe we can go rapid fire here at the end and just kind of go, list off a bunch of the rest of the guys on our list.
All right. So with Ty Simpson, I think it's the perfect situation because odds are Matthew Stafford plays this year and you get a first round quarterback that doesn't see the field. And we've seen some training camp clips. He doesn't look great so far. He's a rookie. Of course he doesn't. He's stepping in and figuring things out. So I think it's the perfect situation on being able to pass, on Ty Simpson in the first round of rookie drafts and then get him at a discount later when people are, especially the contending team that took him at the 110 is tired of not having that bench spot that's creating production for them. Couple of young guys and then some older guys. I'll mention one and not talk about him since he's on your list. Dejon Stribling. So we talked about Deebo Samuel. Stribling's not even 24 years old. He's a rookie. He's wide receiver 52 on Keep Trade Cut. So despite all this steam, despite seemingly having a role in this 49ers offense already, despite a lot of camp buzz, which we should take at a grain of salt for the most part, but the fact that it is coming in so strong and they spent a first round pick on him means we should pay attention. He's ranked just so far away from all of the other rookies near his draft capital. Sorry, I said first round draft pick. He was a top of the second round. So basically, as close as you can get. He's not priced anywhere near any of these other guys that went near him in the draft. So I think Stribling is just a good bet on, hey, we didn't like the prospect, but we still have a value opportunity ahead of us because he is going to have a role. It should have been similar to Shuck, where we don't like the prospect, but based on his based on his value, he's going to get some snaps and we should be in on him. That's my bad. I'm not going to fall for that. I'm not going to have to learn that lesson twice. So I'm going to take Stribling and I'm going to buy Marshawn Lloyd as well. We have a lot of ambiguity around Josh Jacobs, and at a price of RB68, we can get a guy who could potentially have a role this year. And if anything happens to Josh Jacobs, you never know. He could end up being a starter at some point in time. But even if he just gets involved a little bit, has value to where if you say, okay, I don't think this is a guy who's going to lead the backfield, but I was able to pick up Marshawn Lloyd for nearly nothing, and now I can sell him for a third round pick or something to that effect. Jayden Higgins is on my list. I'll give that one to you. We've also kind of talked about him before earlier in the show. Then two a little bit older running backs. One's Blake Corum at just under 26 years old. I think he's a good value where he's viewed as a handcuff, but will be more of a, I think will have more of a weekly role to where he could be usable in fantasy. And if Kyron Williams goes down, God forbid, then we're looking at a bell cow for the rest of the season in this Rams offense, and that's going to be super valuable. And then Rachaad White going back to the veterans that you can pick up and eventually pivot off of, because Rachaad White's going to be a starting running back in this offense. And I think he's going to get a ton of touches and be somebody who absolutely smashes their value that you traded them for. He's RB41. I think you can trade him for top 30, top 24 prices once we get to that point in the season, and he's getting 20 plus touches in the month of October.
Yeah, I love Rachaad White this year. I think in that offense,
it scares me how much I love him.
Yeah, and I think he's the perfect example of value mattering so much, because a player, I mean, is only as good as obviously what they can produce on the field, but that perception of value has swung so widely for Rachaad White to where we were so overrated. Some people were just hyping him up so much. Some people above Bijan Robinson, but we won't call out specific names. Rachaad White is so undervalued. You said it. It's scary, and I'll just leave it at that. Real quickly, rapid fire for me. I have several names I want to list here. First up, Jayden Higgins. Nico Collins has dealt with injuries every single year, and Jayden Higgins is the number 2 there, and they drafted him in the second round. They're going to need him to step up this year. I think he's a really good prospect, and I think that this Texans, I don't love the Texans offense. I'm not in love with like Nico Collins, for example. I don't even really like my guy David Montgomery as much as you do, even though I love David Montgomery, the player. But Jayden Higgins is somebody I can get behind because of the where he's valued currently in the marketplace at player 120, according to Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 44. Just think he has a lot of talent. We kind of mentioned Dezon Stribling. Stribling, man, like just from the Niners' perspective, they are so weird. Like you can make an argument that if they would just draft like a normal team, like if they just had me or you or Joe Blow in there and asked and said, "Hey, does this seem like a good pick to you?" And we said no, and like make a more normal pick, please. Like go ahead and take Cooper DeJean instead of Ricky Pearsall. Maybe you should have turned in that card instead of taking Ricky Pearsall. Maybe just, I don't know, stick with Denzel Boston or somebody like that as a potential understudy to Mike Evans. I don't know. Maybe that doesn't fit your offensive scheme, but whatever. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. But the simple fact of the matter is they value him like they were going to take him in the first round. That's according to my buddy who just lives and breathes for the 49ers. They were going to take him in the first round, but they thought they could trade back, and they still got him with the first pick in the second round. That is a player that you expect to make a big contribution right away. Like that is where T. Higgins went. That's where Michael Pittman went in that range of player. So, and it's setting up right now with the substation and all the injuries going on. Dezon Stribling, who is a big, fast, I think he ran a 4.36 40-yard dash at his size, which I want to say is like 6'2", sub 200 pounds off the top of my head. Like that is a guy that you can work with talent wise. He has some physical traits, some speed, some agility, but it's like, can he put it all together and can he learn the system right away? That remains to be seen, but I trust Kyle Shanahan to use this chess piece accordingly. Anyway, going more rapid fire now. Jonah Coleman, real briefly, the Denver Broncos offensive line ranked number 1 according to PFF last year. And we know J.K. Dobbins likely is not going to make it through the season. And R.J. Harvey was not really an effective rusher last year if you look at fantasy points data and some of the advanced metrics, like just success rate. Like he wasn't a good rusher. He's a better pass catcher than a rusher. So I could see Jonah Coleman edging out a role in that offense. We know about Nicholas Singleton, right? Nicholas Singleton, both of those other running backs aren't under contract next year. Nicholas Singleton obviously is because they drafted him. So it's going to be fascinating to see what the Titans do. I think that's an excellent stash on the end of your benches and a perfect trade target for a rebuilding team. Trey Harris, I want as many shares. I want as much exposure to the Chargers as humanly possible. And I don't see the monumental gap between Quentin Johnston's skill set and Trey Harris's skill set. I just don't. And I think Trey Harris, I mean, last year, if you look at the Chargers offense, the offensive line was in shambles. It was kind of a mess. Now they bring in Mike McDaniel, and I think this really could work. They bring in 3 new offensive linemen. I think that this offense is just ready to hum, and I think Trey Harris can be a big part of that. 2 more names that I threw on at the tail end here that are outside of the top 100 that I think could make their way into the top 75, potentially even like top 60 or top 50, depending on how things go. Matthew Golden is so fascinating to me because Romeo Doubs is out of this Green Bay offense. The targets are there for a player like Matthew Golden, who they drafted in the first round. And if you remember, the Packers don't draft wide receivers in the first round. They thought enough of Matthew Golden to take him in the first round. And I know everybody's in love with Christian Watson. The guy can't stay healthy. Maybe this is the year that he stays healthy. Maybe this is the year he sees 120, 130 targets. But the Packers love to spread the ball around. And I think Matthew Golden's going to have a really nice role in this offense for a player who's valued outside of the top 100. And we've talked about Jordan Love before. I think as much as it bemoans me to say, I think Matt LaFleur is a really good play caller. So I think the combination there with Matthew Golden, I think you could see him take a really big leap in year 2, and it's an asset that I want. And last but not least, well, maybe not last but not least, Jonathan Brooks. Chuba Hubbard was not good last year, and Jonathan Brooks is healthy. And I've kind of been tentatively monitoring the Jonathan Brooks situation. And at first, I won't lie, I was very skeptical that Jonathan Brooks could be anything for Dynasty. And I know the hype, the steam is picked up, but he's still outside of the top 100. And I do think that this is a little bit riskier because of the injury history. But I also think that this is a high risk, high reward type of move going out and getting Jonathan Brooks. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I do think that he is much more talented than Chuba Hubbard, who couldn't buy himself a breakaway run last year. And then the last name that maybe this is going to open up a whole can of worms here and talking about going out and getting injured players. How cheap is Ricky Pearsall going to be? And should we be interested in acquiring him for a rebuilding team?
No.
I am. If he is going to be dirt cheap, I'm interested. Now, it could be just he's ranked outside of the top 200 now. I mean, this is kind of getting ridiculous. Now, we know he's going to miss this entire year. So if you're a rebuilding team, we're talking like he's valued around where Malik Washington is right now. That is so cheap that I think I'm in on trading for him if he's available. But I sense that you do not share my enthusiasm. But that's the last name that I'll throw out there.
Yeah, he'd have to be so dirt cheap because it's going to be close to this time next year before he's ready. And oh gosh, you just never know what's going to happen between now and then. It's just a really tough situation for him. Depends on your status as a rebuilding team. If you can afford to take on that risk, then do it. If you got to be tighter with your moves, that's not something I'm going to be looking into.
Well, there you go. That is a rebuilder's guide for 2026, the Dynasty season. I tried to give you some names, all of them, if not most, I think all of them were outside the top 50. So great tier down candidates. These aren't elite names that you're going to have to go and buy. Like we're not saying, a rebuilder should go out and get a Emeka Egbuka or something like that. I think these are great tier down players that I think their value could spike as soon as this year. And I think that they have good value insulation. And I think, we listed off 20 plus names, and some of them are veterans, and some of you might be mad about that. But hey, it wasn't me that said it. It was Matt Babbage. So direct your anger at him and leave me out of it.
What
please.
are we just? God forbid I throw a different perspective. Hey, listen. apologies to the viewer for the crassness of this. But if you
Oh
have that
no.
many rebuilding teams and all you're doing is trying to
Oh
trade for
no.
young guys, then maybe that's why you're still rebuilding.
Wow. All right.
Um,
There you go. Matt Babbage dunking on the audience here.
it's a
Calling
joke.
them.
It's a
Yeah.
joke. But if you are going to dunk on me for veterans, think maybe is there maybe more than one way to play this game that we like, this
Yeah.
little silly game that we like to play. Maybe there's more than one way to play it.
Got to zig when other people are zagging. Matt Babbage, you got any words of wisdom, or is that the words of wisdom tonight? You got to zig. You got to
It's partly the
serpentines,
words of
man.
wisdom. I think one thing I'll say is we talk a lot about get your guys, and that's where I want the words of wisdom to focus on, because we want the
Yes.
game to be fun.
Yep.
We want the game to be fun overall. So do what you need to do in this game to have fun. Now take it seriously, don't be taking, abysmal trades, try and at least do things that are realistic. But at the end of the day, you want to wield a team that you're going to have fun watching, even if you're having fun rooting for them to lose and rooting for, the stashes, the values that you tried to get. You're rooting for them to bloom, and you're rooting for your team to have, more long-term success. You want to have a team that you enjoy watching and that you have fun managing on a week-to-week basis. So if you're not having fun, first thing that you should ask yourself is what do I need to do to have more fun? And try and go and do that, because if there's anything worse than having a team that's stuck in a rebuild, it's having a team that you just have zero fun managing. And maybe hey, this is last year in this league and I need to find a league that's more active. That's totally understandable. So just whatever it is, we try to have fun playing this game. So do whatever makes it fun for you.
Definitely an advocate of going to get your guys. There's nothing worse than saying, it's a little bit too rich for my blood in ADP, and then seeing him go like a couple picks before he gets back to you. Nope, just go get him. Like, have conviction, have fun. Like, just this game is supposed to be like you getting players you believe in. That's kind of why we do what we do, is like we have players we like, players we don't like. That's this whole content game. We have reasons for those. Hopefully they're good ones. But yes, I completely echo that sentiment. I think that's a great way to go, a great bit of advice to leave people with. So another great bit of advice to leave people with is nobody cares about Aaron Rodgers. So sorry if you like Aaron Rodgers, whatever. I know he goes on Pat McAfee a lot, but anyway, nobody cares about Aaron Rodgers. Thank you so much for watching. Click the like button, subscribe, help us out. Click the alarm bell, get notified of all the content when it drops. New episodes come out on Wednesday. Sometimes we do a bonus episode on Friday. Patreon's going to be coming out, so be on the lookout for that. And until next time, be good, everybody, and we will see you later.